Okay, now that I have the GUI looking the way that I want it to look, it's time to get it to behave the way that I want it to behave. So in this case, I have a button, the guess button, and when the guess button is pressed, I want to process that guess against the game and let the user know if it's valid or invalid, too high, too low, or if they indeed guessed the number. So we need to respond to the button. So let's go to the button first. So we have a button. And the only way that the way that we respond to a button click is by adding a listener. And we need to add anything that is able to listen to buttons. And the things that are able to listen to buttons are any class that implements the action listener interface. So if you put down implement action listener, you become a class that is able to respond to button presses. So I've said that the guessing game GUI is able to do so. So I can just pass myself. I am in an instance of the guessing game GUI. I'm adding myself as a listener. Now, the listener needs to be imported. The other thing that it means to be an action listener, what you're promising the moment you say I implement action listener, that you will have all the methods associated with an action listener. Because what the button is going to do is when the button is being pressed, it goes to all the listeners that have been registered to it and calling those methods that are relevant. So in this case, an action listener must have one method called action performed. And this is simply defined. If you look it up, action listener into the Java interface, you'll see that it has exactly one method, action performed, that takes an action event. So you must have this if you're going to implement the interface. And this is the button, the method that will be called when the button is pressed. So let's make sure that this actually works. So I'm going to do system.out.println and clicked, just to make sure that this is indeed working. The other thing that I now have done is I'm using the class action event here, which also needs to be imported. Import Java AWT event action event. All right, so now that this is in place, when the button is pressed, you should see on the command line a little bit of text that says clicked. So let's make sure that that is indeed happening. Java. So there is my files, and I can run the guessing game GUI. All right, so it's up here. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. So now when I press the button, you see that the text clicked shows up in my command prompts or in your terminal or wherever you're running this. Okay, great. So but this is not, I'm at least something is happening when I press the button, but that's not really what I want to happen. Instead, what I'd like to do is I would like to change something or basically grab the guess and process that guess. So let's grab the guess first. So where is the guess? Well, it's in this text field. So what I'd really like to do is I'd like to go to the entry text field, and I want to get the text that is entered there. And let's put that, it's going to be a string, and it's going to be the guess. And let's actually just print that for now. So if I print the guess, but I need to get it from the text box. And the only problem is this JText field is a variable that is local to this constructor here. To be able to access it, I need it to be available anywhere in the class, in particular to the action performed. So this means that I'm really going to have to make this an instance variable rather than a local variable. I'll move this up and make it private so that it's truly an instance variable. All right, so now in my action performed, I can grab that entry box, which was added to the content pane, and get the text that is in there. And for now, I'm just printing that text to the console. Again, save this, compile the changes, and run it. All right, so let's put some number in here. Let's say I'm guessing 10. I press guess, and yay, it shows up. So I indeed grabbed it. If I put a 10 there, if I hit the button, it shows the 10. If I hit the button again, so great. So I'm able to grab that. The next thing I really want to do is I don't want to just grab that, the guess, and print it. I really want to run it through the game. So now I need to go through a guessing game. So I want to have a guessing game. And really what I want to do is I want to pass that guessing game. And I'll show you quickly what this looks like. This guessing game has a method called manage guess, which checks to see if it's valid or not, too high, too low, and it gives me back the message that should be displayed to the user depending on the guess that was entered. So I really just want to call that method. So manage guess, and I want to pass it the guess that was entered by the user. Now this is going to return to me the message that I should provide to the user. And let's for now print that in the console. So let's say I'm entering 11, which is not valid. That is not a valid guess. Make sure, okay, great. So I'm getting a really nice message here. 5, guess. My first guess is too low. All right, great. So now I'm actually taking this guess and doing something with it. The way that I set this up is a little bit wrong, because now every time I'm clicking the button, I'm creating a new guessing game. And every single guessing game, if I look at the guessing game and when it's created, every single time I create a new guessing game, it is choosing a new random number. I don't want to every button click get a new random number and a new game. I want to continue playing the same game. So really I need one game that applies to the entire class, not just to this method and this single button click. So this here really needs to go and become an instance variable. And now I have my guessing game as an instance variable so I can access it. Notice that I'm initializing it right here. I could do that in the constructor as well. Either one will work. Let's make sure that everything is still working. And I'm going to guess 10. And that is too high. Let's then try 5. Which is too low. So let's try 7. And it's right. Yay! On the third try, I got it. So the last step now is, instead of printing to the console, I really need to put everything in the window. So I don't really want to print that message to the console. I don't want to do that there. Let's put it in that label that I have in my message label. So I want to set the text in the message label to the message that I have received. Again, this is a little bit of a problem because the message label is a local variable in the constructor, so I don't have access to it in action performed. So now again, I am going to make this an instance variable rather than a local variable. So that I can access it both in the constructor and in action performed, and they're dealing with the same object. I mean, I can create two labels, but they're not going to be dealing with the same label then. Right, save this. Compile. run it, and now everything should happen within the window. So if I check a 5, the label changes and it tells me that the guess is too low. If I choose a 7, guess 2 is also too low. Let's go to 9, still too low. So it better be a 10. And I got it right on the first try, on the 4th try. So I got it working. Okay, so this is a complete game running. There's one other thing I want to show you, because the action performed, if you're listening to multiple buttons or multiple events, that same method is going to be called. So I can add to a button an action command. Set action command, and I want to set it to guess, so that I can go in here and I'm going to ask if event.get action command. Now an action event and an action listener is for many different types of widgets and triggers. So many of them can call them, and for many different buttons. So if I just go to the event and ask for what the actual command was that was causing this method to be called, I can check to see that that is guess. If it is, then I want to execute that. Oh. So to get action command, and I need to compare it. So I'm going to get the action command, which is going to return the string, and I want to check if it equals the guess. So notice that it's responding to that, because indeed the button, the guess button, was the source of it. So if you have multiple buttons, you can have different action commands and have the action performed do different behavior depending on which button called the action performed method. So this allows you to have an interface that reacts to button clicks.